established in presence, or you're established in awareness, or you're abiding as the self, capital S. Those fancy terms that point to enlightenment or self-realization. If that is your only experience, meaning that that's your only focal point, which if it totally resonates for you, that's totally great. It can either be a phase that you're into, that you're going through, or it can actually be part of your makeup, but there's not many people for which this is actually their makeup to forever just rest as their self and let that be their 99% focus. Yes, there are those people for which that is actually relevant and for which that actually works, but it is my safe estimation that for most of you, that is not relevant. So in other words, if that is all you have and it's not relevant for you, it in a sense disables you from running, let's say, as an analogy. It disables you, prevents you from being able to run. You're just being able to sit, in a sense, as an analogy. Whereas if self-actualization is all you know, let's say you're into empowerment, you're into law of attraction, you're into creating your dream life, you're into being relational with the world. If that is all you have, then in a sense, you're going to burn yourself out one day. You're going to be running too fast without the, in a sense, legs that can sustain that, without the endurance to sustain that type of running. So for me personally, and I see this in many, many people that I work with, and at retreats and all that, is that to have both, to both be focused on self-realization, to have at least some extent of that, allows you to run, but with the endurance you need to actually do the running. In other words, with the clarity you need, with the confidence you need, with the stability that you need, the faith, the level of faith and surrender that you need, a level of consciousness that is aware of itself beyond just a personality. If all you know is, if you look at the diagram, if all you're conscious of is I am this, the I am this level, where it is person beingness, it's impermanent, it's focused experiencing, it's always focused on things. It's referential, it's always referencing things. And it is that of subject objects, plural. So if you're always in that state of mind, if that's all you know yourself to be, is that person consciousness, the I am this, pointing to the body mind for this, being this inside of a world, if that is all you really know yourself as, and then you start working with teachings that are about affirmations or confidence or empowerment or even authenticity or law of attraction, those type of things, then you don't have the fuel that you need to get very far in those types of realizations or actualizations. So ideally, one is somewhat resonant with both. Now you can be resonant with one more than the other at this timing. That's completely fine. But over time, these two become one perfect blend. They become simultaneous. So the I am this is what most people know themselves to be. It's I am this, body-mind, inside of a world. That's our common mode of understanding and feeling ourselves. If you look a little further and you look at the I section, the awareness section, you see that in a diagram, the awareness wraps itself around presence energy, which is the presence of creation, which is the presence, the energy that makes up everything that is, the isness of creation, including your body-mind individuality. So it is awareness that, in a sense, wraps itself, infuses the presence energy with its own power of cognizance, its power of knowingness, that which, if you just relax right now for a moment, just take a deep breath and give away your thoughts. Disown yourself for just a moment. Disown everything you think you know about yourself. Give it back to God. Give it back to life. Give it back to creation. Don't hold on to any kind of self-knowledge, any kind of thinking. Take a deep breath and sort of become more spacious. Be the space within which all of this appears. And notice that there is an awareness of this moment. There's a cognizance, a knowingness. You are aware of my voice. You've never been able to escape that awareness. You've never been able to have an experience without that spacious awareness, being aware of it, being wrapped around the experience. So in whatever way presence energy forms itself or presents itself to you as awareness, that awareness will be automatically, inseparably infused into that experience. Okay, so if you then look at the diagram with that in mind or heart, you can see that awareness wraps itself around presence energy, meaning creation. So all of creation, all portions of creations are aware. All portions of existence are conscious. And I call it consciousness there, if you see in the thin sort of sphere that surrounds the presence energy, I write down consciousness, referring to the fact that awareness now is aware of something. There is a subject-object relationship. The subject being awareness. The object being, depending on the level of consciousness, either I am, at which stage the object is presence itself, this moment itself, creation itself, essence itself, substratum itself, isness itself. But if that further individualizes itself and that same awareness collapses itself around a singular sort of focal point within presence energy, so out of all that presence energy creates, if you just focus on one localized portion inside of that presence energy and you look at that for a while, which we've all been doing, we call it the body-mind, then at some point you start feeling, or awareness starts generating this base identity feeling, I am this. Does that make sense so far? It's kind of logical, no? If you keep staring at something, you just become identified with it. You start to feel it as if it's yours. So on a sort of universal scale, awareness in all these different multiplications, in all these different individualizations, have become, at different focal points, identified with the sense of I am this, something specific inside of all that is. Hence creating the sense of separation. Because if I am this, I am not everything else that is also part of the same presence energy. And as many scientists and physicists will tell you today and confirm from their experiments, is that from the point of view of presence energy, there is no boundaries. You do not end at your skin. You do not start at your heart or brain. There is no way to separate one place in time from another place in time. From the level of presence energy, seen from the level of presence energy, all that is one energetic being. It's one presence. You cannot make any distinction. Well, you can make distinctions, but you can't separate one portion out of all that is and then say, well, this is not all that is. This is somehow separate from all that is. But if awareness, which is what you are, wraps itself around the personality, around the body-mind enough times, and starts seeing through its eyes, and starts bumping itself into objects, and start being referred to itself by a name, and people start looking at this focal point when they call your name, and then they expect you to respond from here to there. When that happens many times over, that starts to condition the sense, I am this. Now again, if that is all we know ourselves to be, right? So if we don't dabble at all into sort of going back into our source, merging into our essence, as the Tao said, if all we do is have a mind filled with thoughts and we're identified with our own perceptions, if we can't let that go for just 2 to 5 seconds, 12 times a day, then we really honestly have very little business dabbling in things like confidence or empowerment or manifestation or living in attunement or in alignment with your true self. Yes, to an extent, you can definitely do that. But you will fail. You shall fail. Sorry. And I think that's where many people's disappointment comes from. You know, this whole thing that happened like 10 years ago, like The Secret and Law of Attraction became like mainstream popular practice. And now everyone is just tired of it. Everyone is just sad. Everyone's just depressed again. They had hope for a couple of years, but then, you know, they kept fighting for maybe another couple of years, but then they gave up. And again, they were betrayed by all that is. So we're all left with that sense of happiness is impossible. Happiness is not true. Happiness is just an idea. It's not what's relevant. Let's dabble into other types of spiritual practices that work only with the shadow side of ourselves, or that are like real and sincere and serious and actually lead to something. Well, yes, and happiness is a real thing. It still is. That's the good news, huh? Happiness is a very real thing, and it's very manageable, actually. It's very achievable. It's very discoverable. We just have to look in the right places. We have to know how to understand existence. That's really all we need to do. And it's not that hard. It's not that difficult, especially now that I'm here. It's very easy. And the academy is here. So I make it easy on you guys. I had to figure this all out, you know. It took me many years, but hey, here you go. So it's not that hard. When you know how to go about it, it's really not that difficult. So I am this. Can everyone feel that? Just feel that. Even if you don't fully believe it anymore, just feel I am this. Just a sense of it. And if you really can't feel it anymore, just tap into the memory of it if you can. What does it feel like to feel like I am this? I am small, basically. It's another way of saying it. I am limited. I am fragile. Many people feel that they're very fragile, especially women. Absolutely no offense. But because their body makeup is somewhat more fragile and they don't have as much of that, usually not all the time, they tend to feel more fragile, physically speaking. So you can tap into that too. Just tap into the sense of that. And as a guy, you may feel fragile in many different ways. Just feel the sense of fragility. And maybe sense the walls that you've put up around yourself to protect yourself. In the case of someone feeling physically fragile, that strong, seemingly strong, but really very weak mental barrier of, I know who I am. I know what I stand for. I know what I want. I know what I deserve. Feel that tension. Feel that harshness that wants to protect you from the sense of being fragile. Just feel your personal makeup for a moment. Just feel very truthfully, in a very exposed kind of way. Just sense how you've created the sense of being a person inside of an alien universe that is dangerous and where you have to be careful at every turn. In every relationship, you have to be wary. You have to make sure nobody crosses your boundaries. To make sure nobody wants to abuse you. Feel the tensions that you've built up around this sense of being limited and small. It's perfectly all right. Just sense them. The clearer you can feel them, the more easily you can see that you're not it. So right there and then, you've already transcended that whole chunk of conditioning. Instead of looking through it, being sort of unconscious or semi-conscious. Many people are semi-conscious of it. And then continue to live your life like that, sort of like bumping into things still. Thinking you're kind of aware, but you're also kind of like, semi-aware. It's such a fun thing, to be semi-aware of your personality. But become really aware of your personal creation, the construct that you've created to operate, to function, to be safe inside of this paradigm of I am this versus that. Feel the barrier, feel the tension, feel the separation, feel that it is a construct of consciousness, of mind. See it as an energetic sort of spectrum or barrier or whatever, something. Picture whatever it looks like to you, but see that it is a construct, a very flimsy sort of construct. Stands on very weak legs. It's very dependent on other people confirming that construct. Because if they don't, then really, it's a really sort of fragile system. So we've surrounded our sense of fragility with a very fragile counter system. Just feel into that, see how you're operating like that when you feel I am this. Doesn't feel too pleasant, does it? Unless you're aware of it. Then it feels kind of joyful, doesn't it? Maybe you're a little sad about it. Maybe you're still a little attached to it. But you can see now that that has been a creation and actually you're free of it already. Simply by bringing it into full awareness, giving it full space. Having that sort of earnestness that you need on the way of self-realization. The desire or the willingness to discover what's true from what's not true. And again, from that sense of being identified with the personality, it can sometimes seem threatening to take the way of self-realization. Precisely because the fragility in you has become identified with the fragility counterpart or protective shell in you. And so its sense of safety is sort of standing on those two false senses of self. It's way simpler than I make it sound right now. I don't know why I share it in this way, but I do. So maybe it's of some use. Nevertheless, from that point of view only, if that's all you know yourself to be, if that's all you're aware of, then you don't want to give that up because it's all that you know to keep you safe. It's all that you know how to operate in this world of separation and limitation and smallness. But if you realize that, you can conjure up the willingness, the desire to actually investigate and to actually come to the truth of this moment and the truth of who you are and who you're not, what you are and what you're not. So many people that are still identified with this fragility, this sense of I am this inside of a world that can harm me and hurt me and come at me, they sort of avoid the way of self-realization, or simply, in other words, the ability to stay with something, an attention span, shall we say. Because the beautiful thing that everyone knows instinctively about having attention span is that it will kill everything that's false, automatically. You don't really have to know how to do that. If you have an attention span, which is another way of saying the ability or the desire, not the ability, because you all have the ability, but the desire to actually stay with one thing for a moment and not just go all over the place. Something in you knows that the whole structure you've created will fall apart. It needs constant distraction in order to feel safe. Something that's absolutely not safe. In order to make that feel safe, you must constantly distract yourself. So if you don't for a moment, if you remain quiet, if you remain with this moment, and you ignore everything that you have become for just half an hour straight as an exercise. You don't have to do this many times. Just do it whenever you desire to do it. And you will see that as you stay with what's true, right here, right now, this moment, you stay in that sense of consciousness, that sense of I am. Not I am this, I am that, I need to do that. I am undisturbed. Right here, right now. It will eliminate many, many layers of false constructs. It can be a little scary, but it's not really, because the presence you discover, the stability you discover, is that much more reliable, is actually that much more desirable than feeling sort of flimsy and pretending that it's safe, pretending that you know who you are, pretending that you're a strong person. It's much more reliable and solid to actually not be a strong person at all, because then your sense of identity shifts from the fragility of the self-made construct that is bound to disappear. In fact, it already doesn't exist even while you think it does. So it's never really there. It doesn't even have to disappear. It was never the case. The personality never really existed in that sense. Those walls never really existed. And when you discover this, the I am starts shining forth into your experience more and more. And the I am, what is the I am? The I am is the isness that makes up this. That makes up my brain, that makes up your brain, that makes up the space in between us. Everything that is, no? Can you see that everything that is? There's a major clue right there. Everything that is. Get it? Confirmation of enlightenment right there. Very simple. You don't need a teacher, not really. Not for presence, at least. When you want to discover presence, all you need is to notice that everything is present. It's very simple. It's very effortless. And it doesn't require you to work yourself through all kinds of meditations. It just becomes obvious confirmation. Instead of seeking confirmation with a teacher for presence, when it comes to presence, you notice that, hey, this is. I am. She is. He is. That insult is. My reaction to that is. Love is. Hatred is. War is. Peace is. Life is. Animals are. Everything is. And you just start noticing that everything is. And it sort of overwhelms you. At some point it can overwhelm you a little bit. When you're still identified with the person, when the person then sort of penetrates its own bubble and isness starts leaking into its bubble of experience, it can be a little bit overwhelming. But only because you have set up parameters as to who you are. Presence cannot be overwhelming if you're not limited to a particular parameter or location. So it's only initially that you can have a sense of, whoa, I'm going to explode. And in a sense, you can always have that, but it's always at a new level. Wherever your edge is, wherever it expands you, that's where you feel like, oh, I am about to explode. But it's only because your bubble keeps breaking up and expanding and expanding. And in that way, you actually become more of all that is. Your consciousness, that you that recognizes I am right now as I speak to you, that very consciousness will expand and become more of all that is. So the I am practice is very helpful in that initial expansion from the person to the presence that is everything that is. So as soon as you awareness, let's say in your initial phase, awareness that has become the sense I am this, the personality, the being, the person beingness, as soon as the person beingness starts to wake up to presence beingness, that is sort of, in a sense, on the threshold here, on the edge of where the I am this touches the I am. And the more you touch in with the I am presence, and the less you start to believe that I am this, the more, in a sense, you could say that line or your consciousness starts to shift or expand. So it's just right here on the edge of the individual self. are the personality consciousness and the presence consciousness. Does that make sense?